If you found yourself here, it's probably because you have a strange and wonderful mind. Let me reassure you, you are in the right place. My name is Sara, and this is Sara After Dark. Welcome back. If you have returned from a previous episode or even video, then thank you. That means you really enjoy a ghost story, and that's good, because that is exactly what I have got lined up for you today. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at the infamous case, the Enfield Haunting, the most famous and documented poltergeist case that there is. The case that inspired The Conjuring 2. And if you think the movie was scary, just wait till you hear the real story. So buckle up and let me take you into the After Dark. We throw around the term poltergeist, but what is a poltergeist? The word poltergeist actually translates from German to noisy ghost, which a lot of people don't even realise. The term can be given to any spirit who likes to cause some form of disruption, whether that's throwing objects, knocking things over, physically moving things, or generally just making noise, being a nuisance. People seem to think that these spirits are demons or generally demonic, and actually they're not. A demon is a non-human entity, something that has never walked the earth as a human being. It has never been a living person like me and you. That doesn't mean we can't get bad spirits or negative spirits, because believe me, we can. I am very much from the belief that how we are in this life, we lead over into the afterlife. So if we're a bad person in this life, we're going to be a bad spirit. If we're someone who tells a lot of lies in this life, well, the chances are ghosts be lying as well. You know, we live in a life where we have got some very horrible people, murderers and killers, and I won't go into the rest, but you know where I'm going with that one. They at some point die, so they're going to turn into a spirit form. So I don't suppose that the likes of Fred West is going to turn into this nice playful spirit, if you know what I'm saying. Many people believe that these types of spirits, poltergeist, feed off human fear, almost like plugging your phone on charge and watching that battery fill up. So the more fear that the spirit creates, the more full its battery becomes. We refer to the term as energy, but if you think of it as battery, it's no different. Now, the more fuller the battery is of the spirit, the more energy they have, they are then able to do bigger and create more chaos in general. They're able to move bigger objects, make louder bangs, and essentially all that's going to do is create more fear to the human and therefore continuously feed that spirit, keep that charge up. So you are going to end up in this constant loop of poltergeist activity. Now, not everybody believes that a poltergeist is in fact a ghost. Parapsychologists argue that poltergeist activity is not a spirit but something that is actually centered around a person. This is deep, by the way, so just bear with me. It's something called recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis. It's a big word. And it is most commonly found with young females or those who possess some form of psychic abilities. You've probably heard of the term telekinesis, which is basically the same thing. Just like the movie Matilda, Matilda is able to move things with her mind. She is able to feed herself with a cereal without even touching the spoon. She can open and shut doors. She can do anything. She can move anything with her mind, and that is what telekinesis is. Now, they believe that this is exactly what is happening because the person who believes they're being haunted is actually telekinesis and doesn't realise it. So all of these things are happening around this person. Doors are shutting, there's loud bangs, objects may be moving. They think they're being haunted and they think it's a spirit, but it's not. In simple terms, they believe that the poltergeist is not the ghost, rather just a term word for activity. And that activity is being caused by someone who may have telekinesis powers but doesn't even realise it. So they can see things moving around the home, objects being flung, But little to their knowledge, it's actually themselves making it happen. And this is a fascination for me for this subject. And I think it's why I am so intrigued with this field, because there is no right or wrong explanation. There is no right or wrong opinion or right or wrong theory. There isn't, because the truth is, nobody knows. If we could prove 1000% that ghosts were real, then we wouldn't be running around looking for more evidence. We would accept it. We would embrace it, and everything would look so much different. Now, there has been many documented poltergeist cases, with the first one being 94 AD. So yeah, this is something that has been around for a very long time. But one case that will always stand out, certainly for me anyway, and of course inspired the movie The Conjuring 2, is the Enfield Haunting. So let's get into it, because this is a spooky one. Peggy Hodgson was a single mother raising 4 children in her council house at 284 Green Street, located in Enfield in London. Her daughters Margaret, 13, Janet, 11 years old, shared one bedroom, and her 2 younger sons, Johnny and Billy, shared another. Now, everything was normal for this family. They were a normal family. They lived in a normal house on a normal estate, and everything was as it should be until August 30th, 1977. Peggy had gone upstairs after hearing loud noises and banging coming from the girls' bedroom at 1 a.m. So she went up there, I imagine, to probably shout at them and say, "Why aren't you in bed?" But when she opened the door, she found them both cowering in the corner of the room in fear. She claimed that while she was stood there in that room, the chest of drawers began to wobble, eventually sliding away from the wall, almost like somebody was behind it and had pushed it. But other than the 2 girls huddled in the corner of that room and Peggy stood there watching, there was nobody else there. She even claimed that when she tried to push the drawers back, it became impossible, almost like somebody was stood on the other side of the drawers saying, you ain't moving this. Completely terrified, the Hodgson family actually ran out of their house, and they ran into next door's house, which was owned by somebody called Vic Nottingham. Vic then decided to march into the Hodgson home to investigate, I presume, and make sense of what had happened. Kind of brave of him. He claimed he heard a strange knocking noise coming from the walls, just like Peggy's daughters claimed that they had heard. Not really knowing what to do, at this point, Peggy actually phoned the police. Can you imagine being a call handler and taking that phone call from Peggy and her clearly saying, I don't think I've ever heard the voice recording of the 999 call, but I presume that she's going to say that someone is knocking on the walls and the drawer moved by itself. Who do we dispatch? Ghostbusters? Well, they dispatched the police, and this is where the story actually gets even weirder. A police officer arrived at Green Street and entered the Hodgson home to investigate. He actually claims to have physically witnessed a chair move on its own. Not just like a little bit. He said the chair wobbled and then slid across the floor. In fact, he put that in the police statement. That is a documented piece of this case. Now, there was no obvious cause. They then searched the front garden and the back garden, and it left them stumped because there was simply no explanation. This was the very first encounter for the Hodgson family, but this was about to be a long 18-month ordeal with this type of activity and turn into probably the most famous paranormal case in English history. You may be thinking, Sarah, how does this get any worse? We've got something inside a house, terrifying a family, terrifying the kids. The kids are in the corner of the bedroom, shaking and screaming. It's 1 a.m. and even the mothers come upstairs because there's chaos. Things are moving around. The police officers are witnessing furniture moving around. How does it get any worse? Well, that's because the activity escalated rather quickly as well. Every single night, knocks, bangs continued, which weirdly would happen in a pattern of 3. But it wasn't just one wall. It was several walls of the house that this would happen, which then progressed into objects being physically thrown across the room, and furniture generally just being moved. But according to Peggy, this became targeted. When something was thrown across the room, it was usually at one of them, which is interesting because if you listened to last week's episode, I spoke about the most dangerous ghost in England and whether or not spirit can in fact harm us. A lot of people say they can't. I believe they can, and this story points in that direction as well. So if you haven't listened to last week's episode, please do. It's interesting. Anyway, at this point, people began hearing about this family, and more specifically, the house on Green Street. It caught the attention of a reporter and photographer from the Daily Mirror, and they arranged to come and spend some time at the house. But when they arrived, everything seemed fairly quiet. In fact, they were in that house for several hours and nothing happened. So they thought, this is just all stories, this isn't real. So they began packing up their stuff, ready to leave. But just at that, bang, a Lego brick flies across the room, smacking the photographer in the face and leaving him with a very visible bruise. This was exactly the proof that the Daily Mirror needed to move further with this. So they reached out and contacted the Society for Physical Research. They were a group of paranormal researchers who looked into everything and anything that went bump in the night. Now, Maurice Grossi was then dispatched, an inventor turned paranormal investigator, to study Green Street. He arrived in September 1977 to begin his investigations. But this is where things had gotten a whole new level of spooky. Over the next few days, the house kept Maurice busy. He reported witnessing over 2,000 paranormal events in that house, from noises to furniture being moved, objects being flung, and get this, a glass of water mysteriously filling up by itself. Whilst he was there, he actually reported seeing certain shelves in the house bursting into flames, like they were on fire. But then as soon as he would get close to them, the fire would go out, as if there was never a fire. In fact, there wasn't any signs of a fire. It seemed that whatever supernatural force lingered in this house had become significantly stronger, even at one point managing to flip over a bed with the frame and the mattress. I mean, even for a human, that would be very hard, so that concerns me to how something that isn't physically here can do something like that. Anyway, Peggy's daughter, Janet, seemed to be the centre of everything. She seemed to be the centre of it all. In fact, as time progressed, Janet began to fall into these weird trance-like states. She would wake up in strange places, like on top of the wardrobe, and claim that she had no idea how she got there. She also began speaking in weird voices, almost like a man's voice coming out of a small female child, claiming to be somebody called Bill Wilkins. Now, I'm going to actually input the audio, the original audio of Janet speaking in this voice, so you get an idea of how this sounds coming out of a girl. And not only that, listen to what she says.
2 years before I died, I went blind. Then I had an hemorrhage, and I fell asleep, and I died in a chair in the corner downstairs.
I mean, does this terrify anybody else as much as it terrifies me? Can you imagine your child suddenly talking like an old man, dipping in and out of someone else's voice? Or what would you do if you walked into the bedroom and she was just sat in the dark talking like that? Now, there's a big reason why I have inputted that audio in this podcast. And it's because what I'm about to tell you is probably going to blow your mind. Now, just like everything else in this case, everything was leaked. So anytime someone would go in from the press and take photos, that would of course go in the newspaper. And just like this audio recording I've shown you, that was also leaked. And when it was leaked, there was a man who actually come forward. He came forward and claimed that that sounded exactly like his father, William Bill Wilkins. Now, William did in fact live in the Hodgson home, and he was in fact found dead in a chair in that house many years prior to the family moving in, with a bleed to his brain. In fact, the details matched because Bill actually went blind because of these brain issues. Peggy come across shocked and surprised. She claimed that she had no knowledge of this man. So how on earth did her 11-year-old daughter know anything about him? It's weird, isn't it? And it does sort of put you in the belief that how else would she know unless she was in fact channeling the spirit of this guy. Okay, so back to the activity in the home. The poltergeist activity seemed to target Janet the most. So like I said, she was at the raft of everything, including anything that seemed to happen. It always seemed to happen to Janet. It's reported that Janet on occasion was in fact thrown around rooms and would even levitate off her bed, which is weird because I was reading the case files of this, and one of the witnesses just so happens to be a lollipop lady. And the reason her statement is in there is because she was on the street outside on Green Street, and she claims that she looked up because she could see a young girl hovering, floating above the window. Janet even claimed one night she woke up unable to breathe because she was being strangled, and she said the curtain had miraculously wrapped around her neck, which obviously caused her to wake up, and she was gasping and couldn't breathe, and Peggy ran in and removed the curtain from around her neck. That is terrifying. How this family even continued living in this house at this point is beyond me. Now, there is a lot of skepticism with this case, and there has been for many years. Just like any paranormal story, there always comes with skepticism, and that is because, like I said earlier, we can't physically prove. But what makes this haunting so different to others is the amount of eyewitnesses in the case, from doctors, police officers, press, neighbours, people passing by, the lollipop lady. There was over 30 accounts of different statements from different people, all witnessing paranormal activity. Some of the paranormal researchers actually moved into that home with the family. Maurice was one of them who actually lived with the family for the best part of a year. In fact, they said he pretty much turned into family, and the girls would refer to Maurice as being their uncle, which is just really bizarre and strange, but if it makes sense, it makes sense. Now, these paranormal researchers who investigated Green Street at the time, when the family lived there, including Maurice, had some interesting things to say. They believed that this case was 100% genuine. They said all the accounts that they had seen and witnessed themselves were heavily credible. Now, there was a few occasions where the paranormal investigators actually set up some hidden cameras, and they put them in several rooms of the house at different times, different points. They didn't tell the family that they were there. Wrong, maybe, but the reason that they did it is because they wanted to rule out that anyone was tampering or creating things to happen that maybe wasn't actually paranormal at all. They were doing it because they wanted to make sure that this case was being properly looked at, properly investigated, and that they could hand on their heart and say, this is paranormal activity. Now, whilst they had the cameras, the hidden cameras rolling, Janet was actually caught doing some things, let's just say faking activity. There was 2 occasions on particular where Janet was actually caught bending a spoon, which is the oldest trick in the book. And back in the day when they would ghost hunt, they would ask spirit to try and bend spoons. It was a big, massive thing. It was a technique. It was a way investigators would do their practice. Now we use equipment and we use a lot more technology. But back in the day, they relied on basic things and asked them to do basic things. There was also another occasion where Janet was actually caught knocking on the ceiling with the end of a broomstick. So she was creating a bang and a knock, which she was then confronted about, and she admitted it. She didn't even deny that she did it, maybe because she knew she'd been caught, but she said that she did it to test the investigators. She wanted to see if they could tell the difference between real activity and fake activity, which is just absolutely bonkers. And this is an 11-year-old girl as well, bearing in mind. But other than them two things, it didn't explain the majority of this case. I think there was probably things that were fabricated and made a lot worse than they were. But if people are seeing physical objects move, how do we explain that one? Now, Janet was actually sent away. She went to a mental hospital to begin with for an evaluation to make sure that she was okay. And then later, she then moved in with a family friend, to which the paranormal activity notably had gone quiet. In fact, it had stopped. It had stopped completely. And this is where parapsychologists questioned whether Janet did in fact have telekinesis powers, which we spoke about earlier, and was actually the cause of the paranormal activity. Was she making all of this happen around her? Was she causing the furniture to move? Was her mind the power in all of this haunting? Who knows? Now, this case went on to becoming probably the most famous haunting in England, even catching the attention of Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famous American demonologist couple, who did in fact come to Enfield for a visit in 1978, just for one day, which is weird, but they flew out for the day, and Lorraine said that she was fully convinced that this was actually something demonic. She called it a demonic haunting. Do you believe that the Enfield house was haunted? Or maybe it was Janet herself? Was all this just a scam and a moneymaker because it turned into a really big paranormal gold mine? Or was it just simply a genuine haunting? Please let me know what you think in the comments, because I am genuinely interested. There is a big divide when it comes to this case. A lot of people think it was. People think, how can you argue with some of the facts in this story? But then other people believe that they were maybe also in with this to make more money from it. I don't know. That house is now a private house. There is somebody who bought that house and has lived in it quite peacefully for a long, long time. In fact, they claim there has never, ever been any paranormal activity in that house. It's weird, right? But I guess if it's connected to Janet, then would it move around with her? I guess the truth is, we will never know. And that sort of leads me on to something I'd like to talk about to close this podcast. It's a personal story. Now, if you follow me on TikTok and have arrived here from TikTok, you will know that I am currently experiencing paranormal activity in my home. Yes, it is absolutely nowhere on the scale of the Enfield haunting. However, there is some things that's been happening that I think you might find interesting. Okay, I've made some notes because one, there is so much that has happened, and two, I have sort of done this in a timeline so I don't miss anything out. So this started, I would say, early December. I went to Whitby on the 29th of November. It was my birthday weekend and I went to stay in Whitby. On the 30th, I went and drove to a different end of the country and conducted a paranormal investigation in a well-known haunted location. So, this is what led me to believe at the beginning that something had potentially attached itself to me or even just followed me home. Whether that was from Whitby or the haunted location, I wasn't sure of. Now, weird things began happening around the house. Things were making noises that I'd never noticed before. I think we automatically hear something and we go, oh, what was that? Oh my God, it was a ghost. Oh my God, that scared me. But you need to understand that at this point, I hadn't lived in this house for very long. So I was still getting used to the sounds of the house. I think every house has different sounds. You get used to how the floor squeaks in certain areas. You might have a dodgy floorboard as you come up the stairs and it might creak on a certain step. But you get used to that. The longer you live in a house, you start to get used to what should be making a noise and what shouldn't be making a noise. And I feel like I had slowly got used to what noises the house had made, and suddenly there was these new noises. There is a very specific part as you walk into the kitchen that if you stand on it will make a noise. And there's been times where I've been making a cup of tea, for example, and that exact floorboard just creaks in and makes you look. And it was little things like this to begin with. I would say up until mid-December, maybe even closer to Christmas, I had presents wrapped everywhere. But there was one set of Christmas presents in particular that kept being pushed over. So they were actually piled up in the office here, so they were against the greenery, and I had them just sort of, I know it sounds silly saying they were stacked up, of course they fell over, but they were there for about 2 weeks. There was absolutely no issues. All of a sudden, 2 days in a row, these presents just kept coming flying over. So what I did to try and debunk my brain from going into ghosty mode is I moved that pile of presents into the bedroom, and I didn't stack them the same way. I just laid them across the floor, and there was a stocking on the top. Now, the first night nothing happened. The second night, guess what? The stocking come falling off the presents. It happened in the middle of the night whilst I was not quite asleep but laid in the dark. So I heard it happen, didn't really know what had moved, felt like something had moved. Turned my phone light on to see the stocking in the middle of the floor next to the presents, so I knew. So I don't know what it was, but there was something with that pile of presents, or maybe something that was in the presents that someone clearly didn't like. We then fast forward to Christmas Day. Christmas Day, there was glasses on the top in the kitchen, glasses as in drinking glasses. They had been there from the morning, if not the night before, all the way through to about 2:30, 3 o'clock Christmas Day. The middle glass decides to then fly off the top and smash in the kitchen floor. I still can't find an explanation. I still can't find anything logical that would explain how that would happen. I don't think it's possible, because that glass had been there continuously. The surface hadn't changed. The worktop hadn't changed. I hadn't spilt water on there, so maybe if we put water on there, it would cause it to glide and maybe slide off. Nothing. But that glass hit the floor and smashed. So that was something, I think, at this point, Christmas Day for me, it became very apparent that there is a possibility that there is somebody in this house. Since then, it has slowly progressed into several things. For example, the bathroom door is on a sliding track. It makes a very significant noise. If you slide the door, it's like that. That was terrible representation, Sarah. That was more of a vibrational noise. I didn't even know I could make that noise. So firstly, well done you. It's a significant noise. There is no other noise that can be made in this house to replicate the sound of the bathroom door. There is no other door in this house that also is on a sliding track that would make that noise. So when I hear that noise, I know it is coming from the bathroom, and it's relevant because there has been many occasions where I've been laid in bed, watching TV, maybe editing some videos, and then I will hear the bathroom door slide open. And I've come out to look, and nothing looks any different. Nothing looks any different. There is, no window open. It is freezing at the minute, so I don't have any windows open, and there is no windows or external sources on the landing of the upper floors. So it can't be a draft. It can't be, I naturally always try and look for an explanation. I naturally always try and debunk something, if not to make myself feel better, but also because it's important that we recognise what is real and what could be genuinely just something else, if that makes sense. Anyway, probably the craziest thing that's happened in this house is shortly after Christmas, my partner was downstairs in the house. I was upstairs in the office, and she came up the stairs, walked halfway up the stairs, and saw a woman look out of the bathroom door and come back in. Now, she was insistent. She wasn't frightened because she thought it was me. She thought that was me in the bathroom, because she said it was like a silhouette, like a dark figure. But if I didn't have the light on, then that's how I would look, I guess. So she wasn't alarmed until she got to the top of the stairs, realised there was no one in the bathroom, opened up my office door to realise I was sat in here. Then it sort of hit her, like, oh shit, what have I just saw? Because that wasn't you. And it's strange because I'm the one who is heavily, sensitive to spirit. I'm really sensitive to spirit, and I'm constantly looking for it. But they don't seem to show themselves to me, which is so ironic. What else has happened, Sarah? I've had cupboards in the kitchen move, not like swinging open or anything crazy, but you'll open a cupboard in the kitchen and then it might suddenly like wobble or move or like go the opposite way, which is strange. That happens quite a lot. The greenery in here, so you can see this wall here, I've got leaves that come down. There is quite a few occasions where I'll be recording videos in here and I can hear a plasticky noise. I'll look over and the greenery will just be moving on its own. Anyway, this all was happening in the house, and one night I was laid in bed and I began hearing noises from above me. Now the only thing that's above is the loft or the attic. And I actually recorded that and made a TikTok of it. Everyone went mental and I was like, I'm going to go up there and have a look. Now, since that happened, I hear that quite frequently. I don't know what it is about the loft in this house. And I think it annoys me because people naturally see like an attic or a loft as being scary. And that's because, when you watch horror movies and things like that, people put this into your head and, the Grudge is going to be up there with a light. And it's just, realistically, I don't think that the loft is scary. It's pretty much all boarded out. It just looks like another weird room with a brick wall at the back. So I began, me being me, an avid ghost hunter, thinking, okay, Sarah, get your equipment. Let's actually see what's in this house. So I began conducting paranormal investigations in my home, and I do them every single Sunday night live on TikTok. So if you aren't part of this, come and join, because we've got a great community. So yeah, we've been doing these paranormal loft lives every Sunday from my house, and you know what, we have actually caught some really, really good evidence. We have seen things being manipulated. We've heard knocks and bangs and sounds and scratches, even growls. There has been a lot that's happened. Now, something happened very, very recent, which is kind of why I wanted to tell you about all this story, but I think I've gone round the houses a little bit, so I'm sorry. I was doing a dowsing session and then all of a sudden something was thrown at me from behind me. Everyone on that live stream witnessed it happen in live real time. And I would say it's probably the only thing that's really happened in this house that has genuinely scared me. It takes a lot to scare me. It really takes a lot to scare me. But that scared me because it felt targeted. If a spirit wants to move this cup, for example, move the cup, that's lovely. And that's what we want. We want it to move things. We want it to show us that it's real. It has power. It's got the energy. But if that spirit was to then pick that cup up and throw it at me, that's, I think, where I'm a bit like, no, there has to be a boundary. I'm happy with you communicating and I'm happy with you doing things, but you do not come close enough to hurt or harm me, because that goes back to the story of, can they? Yeah, they absolutely can. So yeah, if you already know about that, I am sorry. It's more for people who maybe don't know, because I think if anything major or significant is to happen in this house, I'm going to naturally want to talk about it. And if it's something rather big, then, you know, it might be featured on this podcast. So now we have an understanding that Sarah's been haunted. Yeah? Or maybe I am telekinesis. Maybe the parapsychologists are right, and maybe I'm telekinesis and I'm making things happen. So I'm going to practice Matilda when I finish this podcast with some cereal and see if I am. But yeah, people say, Sarah, how on earth do you just live so casually with a ghost? Well, I do. This is what I do. I ain't frightened of the afterlife. I'm really not. I'm not frightened of spirit. If anything, I invite it because I want to know more about it. So living potentially with one or even multiple doesn't scare me. If anything, it excites me. And yes, majority of the time, I am completely alone in my house. And I think this is why people are like, Sarah, how do you just lay in bed alone, going to sleep, knowing that something's moving around the house? Well, what can I do? And if my partner comes round and stays for the night, couple of nights, whatever that might be, I am then not the only person experiencing the paranormal activity, which confirms to me that there is something going on, or I'm telekinesis. But still, other people are starting to witness this now. The live streams, for example, that we do on a Sunday, people are witnessing. People witnessed something thrown at me. Like, how do you physically explain that? And I think we'll end there, actually, because I feel like I have done a lot of talking. Probably too much talking to the point that I would be surprised if you're even still listening to this part. But, by the way, before we do go, if you have any of your own ghost stories, strange or spooky experiences that you maybe want to share with me, please do email me. There is an email address below this podcast, below this video, in the description. Send a story to there, and I sometimes feature them on the podcast. So if that's something you want to do, you can also remain completely anonymous. So if you want to send a story in, just make it clear to me that you don't want your name mentioned, and I will not mention any names. We just focus on the scary stories. If you could spare a minute and leave me a rate and a review, that would be absolutely amazing. And until next time, keep being a little bit different, even a little bit spooky. Good night.